There's a silent reason most people never escape financial pressure. It's not lack of intelligence, it's not bad luck. And it's definitely not because they didn't work hard enough. It's because they were never taught to recognize the traps, the quiet ones, the normal ones, the ones that don't feel like mistakes until years pass and nothing has changed. You wake up, you work, you earn, you spend, you repeat. And somehow, even when more money comes in, your life doesn't move forward. That's not an accident. That's design. Welcome to this audiobook, 10 Wealth Traps That Quietly Keep You Poor. In this audiobook, you're going to uncover the patterns most people live inside without ever seeing them. You'll understand why income alone doesn't create wealth, why effort without awareness leads to exhaustion instead of freedom, and most importantly, how small, invisible decisions compound into a life you didn't intend to build. We're going to break this down into 10 powerful traps, each one subtle, each one dangerous, each one disguised as something normal. And here's the truth you need to hear early. You don't stay poor because you lack money. You stay poor because you repeat invisible patterns. This is not financial advice. This is awareness training. Because before you can grow your money, you have to stop leaking it. Before you can build wealth, you have to stop destroying it quietly. And if you stay with this audiobook until the end, you will never look at your habits, your income, or your daily decisions the same way again. But first, let me ask you something. How many times have you told yourself, when I earn more, everything will change? Be honest, because that belief is where the first trap begins. Chapter 1. The Illusion of More. There is a moment almost everyone remembers, the first time they earned more money than they ever had before. A promotion, a new job, a side hustle, finally paying off. For a brief moment, it feels like you've broken through, like things are about to shift, like you've finally stepped into a new level of life. But then something strange happens. Nothing changes. Or worse, everything becomes more expensive. Your lifestyle adjusts. Your standards rise. Your expectations grow. And without realizing it, you're right back where you started. Maybe even more stressed than before. This is not coincidence. This is the first wealth trap. Treating every increase in income like permission to increase your lifestyle. It feels harmless. You tell yourself, I deserve this, and maybe you do. But what you don't realize is this. Every time your income rises and your spending rises with it, you cancel your own progress. You stay in the same place, just at a higher cost. And this is exactly how people get stuck for decades, because they're chasing a moving target. More money requires more spending, which requires more money, which requires more stress. It becomes a loop, a treadmill. And the faster you run, the less ground you actually cover. Let me say this clearly. Wealth is not built on what you earn. It's built on what you keep. And what you keep is determined by what you control. Not your job, not your boss, not the economy, your behavior. This is why some people earning average salaries quietly build strong financial foundations, while others earning six figures feel constantly behind, because one group expands their assets and the other expands their lifestyle. Now think about your own life. When money comes in, what happens next? Do you slow down and think? Or do you immediately upgrade something? A better phone, better clothes, more subscriptions, more convenience? Each one small, each one justified, each one invisible. But together, they form a pattern. And patterns create outcomes. Here's the deeper danger. It's not just about money. It's about conditioning. Because every time you reward yourself with spending, you train your brain to associate progress with consumption, not with growth, not with stability, not with long-term thinking, but with immediate comfort. And that is one of the most expensive mental habits you can build, because it keeps you focused on the present moment while silently stealing your future. Now here's the shift. What if every time your income increased, your lifestyle stayed the same, just a little longer? What if instead of upgrading your life immediately, you created space? Space between what you earn and what you spend. Because that space, that gap, that margin, that's where wealth begins. That's where options are created. That's where pressure starts to disappear. But most people never experience that space because they close it too quickly. They earn more and spend more instantly, like filling a bucket with a hole at the bottom and then wondering why it never stays full. This is the first trap, and it's powerful because it feels normal, it feels deserved, it feels harmless. But it is quietly keeping you exactly where you are. And unless you break it, no amount of income will ever feel like enough. Or now, here's where it gets even more dangerous, because once this pattern is set, it opens the door to the second trap. A trap that doesn't just affect your money, but your decisions, your comfort, and your long-term quality of life. A trap that makes people believe they're saving money while actually losing far more. And most people fall into it every single day without ever questioning it. Let's go deeper. Chapter 2. The cheap illusion. There is a belief that sounds smart on the surface. A belief that feels responsible, disciplined, even strategic. Always choose the cheapest option. At first, it seems logical. Spend less, save more, avoid waste. But here's the truth. Most people never stop to question. Cheap is not the same as valuable. And confusing the two is a silent trap that drains your money, your energy, and your future. You see it everywhere. A person buys the cheapest shoes they can find. They look fine at first. They feel fine for a moment, but a few months later, they're worn out, uncomfortable, falling apart. So what happens? They buy another pair, and another, and another, and before they realize it, they've spent more than they would have on something that actually lasted. But the real cost isn't just money. It's discomfort. It's distraction. It's the quiet frustration of dealing with something that never works properly. And that pattern doesn't just exist in small purchases. It expands into your environment, your tools, your habits, even your decisions about time. Because cheap choices often come with hidden costs. Time wasted fixing things, energy drained dealing with problems, opportunities missed because something wasn't reliable. And those costs, they don't show up on receipts. They show up in your life. Now think about this carefully. How many times have you chosen the cheapest option and paid for it later in a different way? Not just financially, mentally, physically, emotionally. This is where the trap becomes dangerous because it disguises itself as responsibility. You tell yourself you're being smart, but in reality, you're trading long-term value for short-term comfort. And over time, that trade adds up, quietly, relentlessly. Now here's the deeper layer most people never see. When you constantly choose cheap, you train your standards downward. You normalize discomfort. You accept lower quality. You stop expecting things to work well. And eventually, you start applying that same standard to your own life, to your work, to your relationships, to your future. Because standards are contagious. They don't stay in one area, they spread. So when your environment is built on just enough, your mindset becomes just enough. And that is not how wealth is built. Wealth is built on value, not price. Value means something gives back more than it costs. It supports you, it lasts, it improves your life over time. Cheap rarely does that. Now let's be clear. This is not about spending more blindly, it's about thinking differently. Instead of asking, how little can I spend? Start asking, what actually serves me long term? Because that question changes everything. It shifts you from reaction to intention, from short-term thinking to long-term strategy, from survival to growth. And here's the shift that separates people who stay stuck from those who move forward. They stop chasing cheap and start choosing value. They invest in things that last. They think beyond the moment. They understand that sometimes paying more up front costs less over time. But more importantly, they understand that the real cost of something is not the price tag. It's the impact it has on your life. Now pause for a moment. Look around you, your space, your tools, your daily environment. Are they helping you move forward, or are they quietly slowing you down? Because everything you interact with either supports your growth or drains it. There is no neutral. And once you see that, you can no longer ignore it. Now, here's where it gets even more subtle. Because after people fall into the trap of cheap decisions, they often fall into something even more dangerous. Something that has nothing to do with price and everything to do with perception. A trap built on comparison. A trap built on ego. A trap that makes people spend money not to improve their life, but to prove something to others. And this one has destroyed more financial futures than almost anything else. Let's step into it. Chapter 3. The Comparison Trap. There is a moment that happens so fast, most people don't even notice it. You're scrolling, you're walking, you're observing someone else's life, and suddenly, something inside you shifts. Not inspiration, not curiosity, pressure. You see someone with a better car, a better apartment, a better lifestyle. And without saying it out loud, a quiet voice appears. I should be there too. That voice is the beginning of one of the most expensive traps in modern life. Because from that moment on, you're no longer making decisions for your life. You're making decisions for your image. And there is a massive difference between the two. This is the comparison trap. And it doesn't just cost money, it costs direction. Because when you start comparing your life to others, you lose clarity on what actually matters to you. You stop asking, what do I need? And you start asking, what will make me look like I'm doing well? And that question, that one shift, it changes everything. Now your purchases aren't about function, they're about perception. You don't buy because something improves your life. You buy because it improves how your life appears. And here's the dangerous part. It works temporarily. You get the validation. You get the attention. You feel ahead for a moment. But that feeling fades quickly because comparison never ends. There's always someone with more, always someone ahead, always someone living a life that looks better from the outside. So what happens? You chase again, upgrade again, spend again, not because you need to, but because you feel like you're falling behind. And this creates a cycle that is almost impossible to escape unless you see it clearly. Now think about this honestly. How many of your financial decisions were truly yours? And how many were influenced by what you saw, what you felt, what you thought others expected? This is not about judgment. This is about awareness. Because once you see the pattern, you can break it. But until you see it, you'll keep playing a game you were never meant to win. Here's the truth most people avoid. Trying to look rich is one of the fastest ways to stay broke. Because real wealth is quiet. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't chase approval. It doesn't perform. But the illusion of wealth? That's loud. It needs to be seen. It needs to be noticed. It needs to be confirmed. And maintaining that illusion is incredibly expensive. Not just financially, but mentally. Because you're constantly measuring yourself, constantly adjusting, constantly feeling like you're not enough yet. And that feeling, that pressure, it drives decisions that don't serve you. Now, here's the shift. What if you stopped comparing completely, not reducing it, not managing it, eliminating it? What if your life was measured only by your progress, your values, your direction? Because when you remove comparison, you remove unnecessary pressure. And when pressure disappears, clarity returns. You start making decisions based on what actually matters, not what looks good, not what impresses, but what builds. And that's when things begin to change, slowly at first, then dramatically, because you're no longer leaking energy trying to keep up. You're redirecting that energy into building something real, something stable, something yours. Now let's go even deeper, because comparison doesn't just affect what you buy. It affects how you think about time, about effort, about growth. And that leads directly into the next trap. A trap that convinces people they're being productive while actually keeping them stuck in place. A trap that feels like progress but delivers none. And once you see it, you'll realize how much time it has already cost you. Let's step into it. Chapter 4. The Productivity Illusion. There is a dangerous feeling that tricks millions of people every single day. It feels like progress. It feels like movement. It feels like you're doing something that matters. But in reality, it's keeping you exactly where you are. This is the productivity illusion. And it's one of the most silent wealth traps in modern life. Because today, being busy is easy. You can answer emails, scroll through ideas, watch videos about success, organize your plans, think about what you want to do next, and at the end of the day, you feel like you've done something, but nothing actually moved forward. No income increased, no skill improved significantly, no asset was built, just activity, endless activity. And that's the trap, because activity gives you the feeling of progress without the results of progress, and over time, that feeling becomes addictive. You stay busy, but you don't move. You plan, but you don't execute. You think, but you don't build. Now here's why this is so dangerous for your financial life. Because wealth is not built on motion. It's built on outcomes. And outcomes require focus, deep focus, uncomfortable focus. The kind of focus most people avoid because it demands real effort. You see, answering messages feels productive, but building something valuable? That requires silence. That requires concentration. That requires doing the same difficult thing over and over again until it works. And most people never stay there long enough. They escape into activity because activity is easier than progress. It's less painful. It doesn't challenge your identity. It doesn't expose your weaknesses. But it also doesn't change your life. Now think about your own routine. At the end of your day, can you point to something real you created? Something that moves you forward financially? Or do you just remember being busy? Because there's a difference, a massive difference. And that difference determines whether you stay where you are or move forward. Here's the truth most people avoid. You can be busy for years and still be broke. Because being busy is not the goal. Being effective is. Now let's go deeper. Why do people fall into this trap so easily? Because it protects them. It protects them from failure. It protects them from discomfort. It protects them from facing the truth. That real progress requires real effort. So instead, they stay in motion. They stay distracted. They stay occupied. And they tell themselves they're working on it. But time doesn't reward intention. Time rewards execution. And if execution is missing, nothing changes. Now here's the shift. You don't need more time. You don't need more tools. You don't need more information. You need fewer distractions and more focus on what actually matters. One task, one direction, one outcome. That's it. Because 1 hour of real focus is more powerful than 10 hours of scattered activity. And this is where your life starts to change. When you stop measuring your days by how busy you were and start measuring them by what you actually moved forward. That's when clarity begins. That's when momentum builds. That's when results appear. But here's the part most people don't want to hear. It will feel slower at first. It will feel uncomfortable. It will feel like you're doing less because you are. You're doing less, but better. And better always wins. Now pause for a second. Ask yourself honestly, are you building or are you just staying busy? Because that answer is shaping your future right now. Good now, we move into something even deeper because once people realize they're not progressing, they often try to fix it. They try to change. They try to improve, but they fall into another trap. A trap that feels like discipline, but is actually inconsistency in disguise. A trap that keeps people starting, but never finishing. And this one destroys more potential than failure ever could. Let's go there. Chapter 5. The Start-Stop Cycle. There is a pattern that feels like effort, but produces almost nothing. It looks like discipline. It sounds like commitment. It even gives you moments of motivation. But in reality, it keeps you stuck in the exact same place. This is the start-stop cycle, and it's one of the most frustrating traps you can fall into because it creates the illusion that you're trying while quietly preventing you from ever finishing anything. You've felt this before, that surge of energy, that moment when you decide, this time, I'm serious. You plan everything. You set goals. You feel focused. And for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, you show up. You work. You push. You try. But then something happens. You get tired, distracted, overwhelmed, and slowly you stop. Not completely. Just enough. You tell yourself you'll come back to it tomorrow, next week, when things feel right again. But when you return, you're not where you left off. You've lost momentum. You've lost clarity. You've lost energy. So what do? You start again, from the beginning. And this is where the trap locks in. Because every time you restart, you lose more than time. You lose trust in yourself. You begin to believe that you're someone who doesn't finish, and that belief is far more dangerous than failure, because failure still moves you forward. But stopping erases progress. Now think about this honestly. How many things have you started but never fully completed? Projects, skills, ideas, plans, each one left unfinished, each one draining a little bit of your confidence. And over time, that builds a quiet identity, an identity that says, I try, but I don't follow through. And once that identity sets in, everything becomes harder. Because now it's not just about effort, it's about belief. Now here's the deeper truth. Most people don't fail because they lack discipline. They fail because they misunderstand it. They think discipline is intensity, pushing hard, doing more, going all in. But real discipline is consistency. It's showing up when it's boring, when it's repetitive, when nothing exciting is happening, because that's where progress actually lives, not in bursts, but in repetition, small actions, repeated daily, without interruption, without negotiation. That's what builds results. But the start-stop cycle breaks that. It interrupts the process. It resets your progress. And it keeps you trapped in the beginning, forever. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, how hard can I go? Start asking, how long can I stay consistent? Because speed doesn't build wealth. Consistency does. The person who moves slowly but never stops will always outperform the person who moves fast but keeps quitting. Always. And once you understand that, everything changes. You stop chasing intensity. You start protecting consistency. You simplify your actions. You remove unnecessary pressure. You focus on what you can sustain, not what looks impressive. And that's when real progress begins. Quietly, steadily, powerfully. Now pause for a moment. Look at your current path. Are you building something consistently, or are you stuck in cycles of starting over? Because that answer is shaping your future more than anything else. And now we step into something even more subtle. Because even when people become consistent, even when they start showing up, they still fall into another trap. A trap that doesn't break their effort, but slowly drains its impact. A trap that keeps them working, but not growing. And this one is built around comfort, familiarity, and the dangerous belief that staying where you are is safer than evolving. Let's go deeper. Dear friend, you are definitely on the right track if you are watching this video. Like, subscribe, and write in the comments which topic or problem concerns you the most. We promise to prepare a professional video explanation at your request. Chapter 6, The Comfort Cage. There is a version of your life that feels safe, predictable, manageable, familiar. You know your routine, you know your limits, you know what to expect. And at first, that feels like stability. It feels like control. But over time, something changes. That same comfort becomes a cage. This is the next wealth trap. And it's one of the most dangerous because it doesn't look like a problem. It looks like peace. You wake up, you follow your routine, you do what you've always done, and nothing goes wrong, but nothing grows either. And that's the hidden cost. Because while you stay comfortable, the world keeps moving. Opportunities evolve. Skills become outdated. Standards rise. And slowly, without any dramatic moment, you fall behind. Not because you failed, but because you stayed the same. Now here's the truth most people avoid. Comfort is expensive, not immediately, not obviously, but over time, it costs you growth. It costs you opportunities. It costs you the future you could have built. Because growth only happens in discomfort, in uncertainty, in challenge, in situations where you don't feel fully ready. And most people avoid that, not because they're lazy, but because it feels risky. It feels uncomfortable. It feels unfamiliar, so they stay where it's safe. And that decision, repeated over years, creates a life that feels stable, but limited. Now think about this honestly. When was the last time you did something that truly challenged you? Not something slightly difficult, something that forced you to grow, something that made you uncomfortable, something that pushed your limits. If it's been a while, you might already be inside the comfort cage. And here's how you know it's happening. You start justifying your current position. You tell yourself, this is enough. This is fine. I don't need more. But deep down, there's a quiet feeling, a sense that you're capable of more, a sense that you're holding back. And ignoring that feeling is one of the most expensive decisions you can make. Because potential doesn't disappear. It waits. And the longer you ignore it, the heavier it becomes. Now here's the shift. You don't need to destroy your comfort. You need to expand beyond it. Step by step. Challenge by challenge. Decision by decision. Because growth doesn't require chaos. It requires movement. Small movements into unfamiliar territory, learning something new, taking on more responsibility, building a skill that stretches you, each one uncomfortable, each one necessary. Because every time you step outside your comfort, you expand your capacity. And capacity is what creates opportunity. Opportunity to earn more, to build more, to become more. But if you stay comfortable, your capacity stays the same. And if your capacity stays the same, your results will too. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, are you growing or are you just maintaining? Because maintaining might feel safe today, but it becomes expensive tomorrow. And now we move into something even more hidden. Because even when people step out of comfort, even when they push themselves, they often fall into another trap. A trap that has nothing to do with effort and everything to do with identity. A trap that quietly controls how much money they allow themselves to make, how much success they allow themselves to reach, and how far they believe they can go. This one is deeper. This one is internal. And once you see it, you'll understand why so many people stop right before they break through. Let's go there. Chapter 7. The Identity Ceiling. There is a limit that exists in your life, a line you don't see, a boundary you didn't consciously choose, but one that quietly controls everything. How much you earn, how much you keep, how far you grow. This is not a financial limit, it's an identity limit, and it might be the most powerful wealth trap of all, because no matter how hard you work, no matter how many opportunities come your way, you will always return to the level you believe you deserve. Read that again, slowly. You don't rise to your goals. You fall back to your identity. This is where most people get stuck. Not because they lack skill, not because they lack opportunity, but because deep down, they don't see themselves as someone who can hold more. So even when they get close, they pull back, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, but always consistently. Now think about this. Have you ever had a moment where things were finally going well, money improving, opportunities appearing, momentum building, and then somehow it slipped. A bad decision, an unnecessary expense, a loss of focus, and suddenly you're back where you started. That's not random, that's identity. Because if your internal standard says, "This is where I belong," you will always find a way to return there, even if it means sabotaging your own progress. Now here's why this happens. Your mind is designed to keep you consistent, not successful. Consistent with what you believe is normal. Consistent with what feels familiar. Consistent with what matches your identity. So if you've spent years seeing yourself as someone who struggles financially, that becomes your baseline, your comfort zone, even if it doesn't feel comfortable. And anything above that feels unstable, unfamiliar, almost wrong. So what do? You unconsciously correct it. You spend more, you slow down, you lose focus, not because you want to fail, but because success feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe. This is the identity ceiling, and it's invisible, which makes it even more dangerous. Now here's the shift. You don't break this trap by working harder, you break it by thinking differently about who you are, because your actions follow your identity. Always. If you see yourself as someone who builds wealth, your decisions will reflect that. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, your decisions will reflect that too. So the real question is not, what should I do? The real question is, who am I becoming? Because once that answer changes, everything else follows. Now let's make this practical. Start paying attention to your internal language, the way you describe yourself, the way you think about money. Do you say things like, "I'm just not good with money. I always end up back here. That's just how things are for me"? Those aren't just thoughts. They're instructions. They're reinforcing your identity over and over again, and your life is following them. Now imagine shifting that, not with empty motivation, but with intentional awareness. I'm learning to manage money better. I'm building discipline. I'm becoming someone who keeps what I earn. At first, it might feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, but that's the point. Because growth always feels unfamiliar in the beginning. And the more you repeat that new identity, the more your actions begin to align with it. Slowly, then consistently, then powerfully. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, what identity have you been living under? And is it helping you or holding you back? Because once you see it, you can change it. But until you see it, it will keep controlling everything. And now we move into something even more practical, but just as dangerous. Because even when people shift their identity, even when they start thinking differently, they often fall into another trap. A trap that feels like reward, but quietly destroys progress. A trap built around emotion, impulse, and the need to feel good right now. This one is subtle, this one is common, and this one leaks money faster than almost anything else. Let's step into it. Chapter 8, Emotional Spending, the Silent Leak. There is a version of spending that feels harmless, almost invisible. It doesn't look like a big decision. It doesn't feel like a mistake. It often feels deserved. You had a long day. You felt stressed. You needed a break. So you buy something, not because you need it, but because you want to feel better. This is emotional spending, and it is one of the most common wealth traps in the world. because it doesn't come from logic. It comes from feeling. And feelings are powerful. Now here's what makes this trap dangerous. It rarely shows up as one big expense. It shows up as many small ones. A delivery here, a quick purchase there, something just to relax, something to treat yourself. Each one small, each one justified, each one easy to ignore. But together, they form a pattern, a leak, a slow, consistent drain on your financial progress. And because it's tied to emotion, it's hard to stop. Because you're not just breaking a habit, you're breaking a coping mechanism. Now let's go deeper. Why does emotional spending happen? Because it gives immediate relief. It changes your state. You feel down. You buy something. You feel better. You feel stressed. You spend. You relax. You feel bored. You scroll. You purchase. You get a quick hit of excitement. It works, temporarily. But that's the problem, because it trains your brain to solve emotional discomfort with financial decisions. And over time, that becomes automatic. You don't even think about it, you just act. And this is where money starts disappearing quietly, not in big obvious ways, but in small repeated behaviors. Now think about this honestly. How often do you spend money based on how you feel instead of what you actually need? No judgment, just awareness. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now here's the deeper cost. It's not just about money, it's about control. Because when your emotions control your spending, your future becomes unpredictable. You can plan, you can budget, you can set goals. But if your emotions override those plans, nothing holds. And that creates instability, not just financially, but mentally. Because you start feeling like you're not in control. Like no matter what you try, you keep slipping back. Now here's the shift. You don't eliminate emotion. You separate it from decision-making. You create space, a pause, between feeling and acting. Because in that pause, you regain control. Instead of reacting, you choose. Instead of escaping, you decide. Now here's something simple, but powerful. The next time you feel the urge to spend, don't stop yourself immediately. Just wait. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? Not what you want to buy, what you're trying to escape. Because most of the time, it's not about the purchase. It's about the emotion behind it. Stress, boredom, frustration, loneliness. And once you identify that, you can address it directly without spending. Because money is not the solution to emotional discomfort. It's just a temporary distraction. And distractions don't solve anything. Now imagine this. Imagine if every emotional spending decision was redirected into awareness, into control, into intentional action. How much money would you keep? How much stability would you build? How much clearer would your path become? Because it's not about perfection, it's about interruption, interrupting the pattern before it becomes automatic. And that's where power returns. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. Because even when people control their spending, even when they become more aware, they often fall into another trap. A trap that sounds responsible, a trap that feels safe, a trap that almost everyone has been taught since childhood. But in today's world, it might be one of the most limiting beliefs you can hold. A trap built around security, stability, and the idea of playing it safe. Let's go deeper. Chapter 9. The Safety Trap. There is a belief that has been passed down for generations, a belief that sounds wise, responsible, even necessary. Play it safe. Get a stable job. Avoid risk. Protect what you have. And on the surface, it makes sense because safety feels good. It feels controlled, predictable, secure. But here's the truth most people never question. What if the biggest risk is staying safe? This is the safety trap. And it quietly keeps people in financial limitation for years, sometimes entire lifetimes. Because while safety protects you from loss, it also limits your growth. And growth is where wealth is built. Now let's be clear. This is not about reckless decisions. It's not about gambling your future. It's about understanding the difference between real security and the illusion of security. Because in today's world, what feels safe is often the most fragile. A single income stream, a fixed routine, a predictable path. It feels stable until something changes. The job shifts, the market moves, the opportunity disappears, and suddenly that safe position isn't so safe anymore. Now think about this. How many people spend years building a life around stability only to realize they've limited their own potential? Not because they failed, but because they never allowed themselves to expand. They stayed where it felt comfortable, where it felt controlled, where nothing unexpected could happen. But here's the hidden cost. Nothing extraordinary happens there either. No breakthroughs, no major growth, no real leverage, just maintenance. Now ask yourself honestly, are you choosing safety or are you choosing growth? Because they often don't exist in the same space. Growth requires uncertainty, learning something new, trying something unfamiliar, taking a step without guaranteed results. And that feels uncomfortable, it feels risky, so most people avoid it. They stay in what they know, and over time, that choice compounds into a life that feels secure, but limited. Now here's the deeper layer. The safety trap doesn't just affect your actions, it affects your thinking. You start avoiding opportunities, not because they're bad, but because they're uncertain. You start rejecting growth because it challenges your comfort. You start convincing yourself that where you are is enough, even when you know it's not. And that's where the trap locks in. Because now it's not just behavior, it's belief. Now, here's the shift. You don't abandon safety, you redefine it. Real safety is not about avoiding risk. It's about increasing your capacity, your skills, your knowledge, your adaptability. Because the more capable you become, the less fragile your life is. You're no longer dependent on one path. You create options, and options are the real form of security. Now imagine this. Instead of asking, how can I stay safe? You ask, how can I become stronger? Stronger financially, stronger mentally, stronger in your ability to adapt. Because strength creates freedom, and freedom creates opportunity. But if you stay focused on safety alone, you limit both. Now pause for a moment. Look at your current path. Is it truly secure or just familiar? Because familiarity feels safe, but it doesn't guarantee anything. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to leave. Good now, we step into the final trap. The one that ties everything together, the one that sits quietly behind all the others. Because even if you avoid every trap we've covered, this one can still hold you in place. It's not about money, it's not about habits, it's about time and how you choose to use it or waste it. This is the trap that decides everything. Let's finish strong. Mate, write which city you're from, It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 10. The Time Leak. There is one resource that everyone has, rich or poor, successful or struggling, focused or distracted: time. And unlike money, you cannot earn more of it. You cannot store it. You cannot get it back. You can only choose how it is used, and that choice quietly determines everything. This is the final wealth trap, the time leak, and it is the one that sits behind all the others, because every financial mistake, every missed opportunity, every delayed decision can be traced back to how time was used or wasted. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't lose money. They lose time. And time loss eventually becomes money loss. You don't notice it at first because time leaks don't feel dramatic. They feel small. Scrolling for a few minutes, watching something just to relax, delaying something important until tomorrow. Each moment insignificant, each decision harmless. But together, they form a pattern, and patterns shape your life. Now think about this honestly. How many hours have you given away this week without intention? Not rest, not recovery, just distraction. Moments that didn't build anything, didn't move you forward, didn't add value to your life. That is the leak. And the problem is not that it happens. The problem is that it happens consistently, because consistency is powerful, whether it's used for growth or for stagnation. Now here's where this becomes dangerous, because time doesn't just disappear, it compounds. Every hour you invest in growth builds something. Every hour you waste delays something. And over months, over years, that difference becomes massive. Two people, same starting point, same opportunities. One uses time intentionally, the other lets it slip. At first, there's no visible difference, but over time, their lives separate completely. Not because of talent, not because of luck, but because of how they used their time. Now here's the deeper layer. Time is not just about hours, it's about attention. Where your focus goes, your life follows. If your attention is scattered, your results will be scattered. If your attention is focused, your results will be focused. And in today's world, attention is constantly under attack. Notifications, content, endless distractions designed to pull you away from what matters. And if you don't protect your attention, you lose control of your time. And if you lose control of your time, you lose control of your direction. Now here's the shift. You don't need more time. You need better boundaries. Boundaries around your focus, your environment, your priorities. Because when you protect your time, you protect your future. Now imagine this. Imagine giving just one focused hour a day to something that builds your life, a skill, a project, a direction. 1 hour every day. No distractions, no interruptions, just focus. At first, it doesn't seem like much, but over time, it changes everything, because consistency compounds, just like waste does. And this is where your power returns. When you stop letting time leak and start directing it with intention. Now pause, ask yourself, where is your time really going? And more importantly, is it building the life you want or delaying it? Because the answer to that question is the answer to your future. Awareness changes everything. You've now seen the traps. Not loud ones, not obvious ones, quiet ones. The kind that feel normal, the kind that blend into everyday life, the kind that slowly shape your future without you realizing it. From spending more when you earn more, to choosing cheap over valuable, to comparing your life to others, to staying busy without progress, to starting without finishing, to staying comfortable, to limiting your identity, to spending emotionally, to playing it too safe, to leaking your time, each one small, each one subtle, but together they form a system that keeps people stuck, not because they lack potential, but because they lack awareness. And now you are aware, and that changes everything, because once you see the trap, you have a choice. You can continue as before, or you can step differently, think differently, act differently, build differently. Not overnight, not perfectly, but intentionally, because wealth is not built in one moment. It's built in patterns, daily decisions, repeated consistently, aligned with a clear direction, and now you have that clarity. So here's your next step. Don't try to fix everything at once. Choose one trap, just one, the one that resonated the most, the one that felt the most familiar, and start there. Shift it, interrupt it, replace it with something better, because one change done consistently can alter your entire trajectory. Now, before we close, take a moment, reflect. Which trap are you breaking first? If this audiobook shifted something for you, if it made you think differently, then make a small commitment to yourself right now. Not to me, to yourself. Because change doesn't happen when you listen. It happens when you act. And if this resonated with you, share what hit you the hardest. Not for validation, but for clarity. Because when you put it into words, you make it real. And if you want to continue this journey, if you want to build discipline, focus, and awareness at a deeper level, stay connected, stay consistent, stay intentional, because this is not the end. This is the beginning of seeing your life clearly. And once you see clearly, you can build powerfully. Remember this, wealth is not something you chase. It's something you build by removing what quietly holds you back. And now, you know what those things are. Your right to continue, because this is where most people stop. They hear the ideas, they feel the impact, and then they go back to the same patterns. So let's go deeper, not into new traps, but into transformation, because awareness without action changes nothing. Chapter 11, The Shift from Reaction to Control. There is a moment that separates people who stay stuck from those who begin to move forward. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It doesn't come with a big announcement. It's a quiet decision. A decision that says, I'm done reacting, and I'm starting to control. Because if you look back at every trap we've uncovered, they all have one thing in common. They are reactive, spending when you feel, comparing when you see, starting when you're motivated, stopping when it's uncomfortable, choosing safety when you're unsure. Reaction, automatic behavior, unconscious patterns. And as long as your life is driven by reaction, you will always feel like you're catching up, like you're trying to fix things after they happen. But control is different. Control is intentional. It's choosing your actions before your emotions decide for you. It's pausing before you spend, thinking before you react, planning before you move. And that shift from reaction to control is where your life begins to change. Now here's the truth. Control is not natural. Reaction is. Your brain is wired for it. Quick decisions, immediate responses, instant gratification, that's survival. But wealth is built on the opposite. Delayed decisions, intentional actions, long-term thinking, and that requires training, daily training, because if you don't train your mind, it will default to reaction every time. Now let's make this real. Imagine two versions of you. One reacts, sees something, buys it, feels tired, avoids work, feels pressure, plays it safe. The other controls, sees something, pauses, feels tired, shows up anyway, feels pressure, leans into growth. Same person, different decisions, different life. Now multiply that difference over months, over years, and you get two completely different outcomes. Not because of luck, not because of talent, but because of control. Now ask yourself honestly, which version have you been living? And more importantly, which version are you choosing from this point forward? Because that choice is happening every single day, in small moments, invisible moments, moments that don't feel important, but define everything. Now here's the shift you can make immediately. Slow down, not your progress, your decisions, because speed is what feeds reaction. But clarity? Clarity comes from pause, and in that pause, you take back control. Chapter 12, Building the Gap. Where wealth actually lives earlier, we talked about something simple but powerful, the gap, the space between what you earn and what you spend. That space is everything, because that's where wealth begins. Not in your salary, not in your job title, not in how much money flows through your hands, but in how much stays. And more importantly, what you do with what stays. Now here's what most people don't realize. The gap is not created by accident, it's created by intention. Because without intention, your life will always expand to match your income. Always. More money comes in, more money goes out. No gap, no growth, just movement. Now here's the shift. You protect the gap. You treat it like something valuable. Because it is. It's your future, your options, your flexibility, your ability to make decisions without pressure. And once you start protecting that gap, everything begins to change. You feel less stress. You feel more control. You start thinking differently about money, not as something to use immediately, but as something to build with. Now imagine this. Every time you earn more, instead of upgrading your life instantly, you expand a gap, even slightly, even temporarily. What happens? You begin to accumulate not just money, but stability. And stability creates confidence. Confidence to take risks, to explore opportunities, to think beyond survival. And that's where real growth begins. Now here's the key. This is not about restriction, it's about direction. You're not limiting your life. You're shaping it. You're deciding what matters now and what matters later. And once you understand that, spending becomes intentional. Saving becomes purposeful. And money becomes a tool, not a reaction. Now pause. Think about your current gap. Does it exist? Or does your income disappear as quickly as it arrives? Because that answer is defining your trajectory right now. And now, we go even deeper. Because once you build control, once you protect the gap, once you start shifting your patterns, you unlock something powerful, clarity. And clarity changes how you see everything, including opportunity. Because the next chapter is not about avoiding traps. It's about recognizing what others miss. And once you see it, you can never go back to thinking small again. Chapter 13, Seeing What Others Ignore. There is a moment in every transformation when things start to look different, not because the world changed, but because you did. The same opportunities are still there, the same people, the same environment, but now you see more. You notice patterns. You recognize traps. You question things you used to accept. This is clarity, and it's one of the most valuable assets you can build, because once you see clearly, you stop moving blindly. Now here's the truth. Opportunities are not rare. They're everywhere. But most people don't recognize them because they're distracted. Distracted by comparison, by comfort, by short-term thinking. So even when opportunity appears, they miss it. Or worse, they ignore it. Now let's define what opportunity really is. It's not always obvious. It doesn't always look exciting. Sometimes it looks like effort, learning a skill, starting something small, taking a step without immediate reward. And that's why most people overlook it, because they're looking for something easier, faster, more comfortable. But real opportunity, it usually requires patience, consistency, and a willingness to start small. Now think about this. How many opportunities have you already seen but didn't act on? Not because they weren't real, but because they didn't feel urgent or exciting or guaranteed. This is where clarity changes everything, because now you don't need excitement to act. You need direction. You don't need certainty. You need awareness. And once you have that, you start moving differently. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You start building with what you have, and that's when momentum begins. Now here's the deeper layer. Opportunity is not just about what you do. It's about how you think. Because when your thinking expands, your options expand. You start seeing connections, ideas, paths that weren't visible before. And that's how people create leverage, not by working more, but by seeing better. Now imagine this. Two people in the same situation, same resources, same environment. One sees limitations, the other sees possibilities. One stays where they are, the other builds something new. What changed? Not the situation, the perspective, and perspective is shaped by awareness. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, are you looking at your life through limitation or through possibility? Because that lens is shaping every decision you make. Chapter 14, From Income to Assets. Now that you see more clearly, we need to talk about something critical, because this is where most people misunderstand wealth completely. They focus on income, how much they earn, how much they make per month, how to increase their salary. And while income matters, it is not the foundation of wealth. Assets are. And there is a difference. Income is what you earn. Assets are what you build. Income requires your time. Assets continue without it. Now here's the problem. Most people spend their entire lives chasing income without ever building assets. They work harder, earn more, upgrade their lifestyle, and repeat. But nothing accumulates. Nothing grows beyond their effort. And that's why they feel stuck. Because income alone does not create freedom. It creates movement. Assets create stability, leverage, options. Now think about this. If you stop working today, what continues? What produces value? What supports your life? If the answer is nothing, then everything depends on your effort. And that's a fragile position. Now here's the shift. You start thinking beyond earning and into building. Building something that lasts, something that grows, something that works for you, not just because of you. Now this doesn't have to be complex. It starts small. A skill that becomes valuable. A project that generates income. An investment that grows over time, each one an asset, each one a step toward independence. And the key? Consistency. Because assets are not built overnight. They are built through repeated action, focused effort, long-term thinking, and most people avoid this because it feels slow. But slow is powerful because slow builds foundation, and foundation creates strength. Now imagine this. Instead of spending all your energy chasing income, you redirect some of it into building assets. What happens over time? You create layers. Income from your work, growth from your assets, stability from your systems. And suddenly, your life is no longer dependent on one source. You have options. And options are the beginning of freedom. Now pause. Ask yourself, am I only earning or am I building? Because that answer defines your future. And now, we go deeper into something even more powerful. Because once you shift from income to assets, you unlock a new level of thinking, a level where your decisions are no longer based on survival, but on strategy. And that's where the real game begins. If you enjoy these audiobooks and want to support the channel, consider joining our private members community. Members get early access to new audiobooks and exclusive wealth lessons. Chapter 15, Thinking in Strategy, Not Survival. There are two ways people move through life. One reacts to what happens. The other prepares for what could happen. One thinks about today. The other builds for tomorrow. This is the difference between survival thinking and strategic thinking. And this shift is where everything begins to accelerate. Because when you're in survival mode, every decision is immediate. How do I pay this? How do I get through this week? How do I fix this right now? And when your mind is focused on survival, you don't have space to think long term. You don't think about assets. You don't think about leverage. You don't think about building. You think about relief. And relief keeps you in cycles. Now here's the truth. Most people are not stuck because they lack opportunity. They're stuck because they're trapped in survival thinking, and survival thinking is reactive. It keeps you solving problems instead of building systems. It keeps you busy instead of effective. Now imagine this. Instead of asking, how do I get through today? You start asking, how do I make this easier tomorrow? That one shift changes everything. Because now you're not just reacting. You're planning. You're building. You're creating systems that reduce pressure over time. Now, let's make this real. Instead of constantly chasing income, you build something that produces it. Instead of solving the same problem repeatedly, you create a solution that lasts. Instead of working harder, you start working smarter. Not in a lazy way, but in a leveraged way. Because leverage is what strategy creates, and leverage is what allows you to grow without burning out. Now here's the deeper layer. Strategic thinking requires patience. And patience is difficult because it doesn't give immediate results. You won't feel the reward instantly. You won't see the outcome right away. But over time, it compounds, quietly, powerfully, until one day the effort you put in starts working for you. And that's when things begin to shift. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, are you solving the same problems over and over? Or are you building solutions that last? Because that answer is defining your direction. Chapter 16, The Power of Focused Direction. There is something that most people underestimate, and it costs them years. Direction, not effort, not motivation, not even discipline. direction. Because without direction, effort is scattered. You work hard, but in different places. You try different things, but never long enough. You move, but you don't progress. And that's one of the most frustrating experiences, feeling like you're trying, but not moving forward. Now here's why this happens. Because direction requires clarity, and clarity requires decisions, clear decisions about what matters, about what doesn't, about where you're going, and what you're willing to ignore. And most people avoid that because deciding one path means letting go of others, and that feels uncomfortable. So instead, they stay open. They try everything. They move in multiple directions, and as a result, they don't go far in any. Now here's the truth. Focus is not about doing more, it's about doing less, better. Because when your energy is concentrated, your results multiply. But when your energy is scattered, your results disappear. Now think about this. If you put all your effort into one clear direction for a long enough period of time, what could you build? A skill, a business, an asset, something real, something valuable. But most people never reach that point because they change direction too often. They lose focus, they restart, and that resets their progress again and again and again. Now here's the shift. You choose a direction and you commit to it. Not for a week, not for motivation, but for the long term. Through discomfort, through boredom, through uncertainty. Because direction is not proven in easy moments. It's proven when things feel slow, and you keep going anyway. Now imagine this. Instead of constantly searching for the best path, you fully commit to one. You give it time. You give it effort. You allow it to develop. What happens? Momentum builds, skill improves, results appear, not instantly, but inevitably. Now pause. Ask yourself, do you have a clear direction, or are you still searching? Because clarity is the foundation of progress. And now, we move into something that ties everything together. Because even with direction, even with strategy, even with awareness, there is one final piece, one factor that determines whether you follow through or fall back. And that factor is discipline. Not the kind that feels good, the kind that works. Let's go there. Chapter 17, Discipline that actually works. There is a version of discipline most people believe in, and it doesn't last. It's loud, aggressive, fueled by motivation. It shows up in bursts. You wake up early, you push hard, you go all in. For a few days, maybe a week, you feel unstoppable. And then it fades. You slow down, you lose energy, you fall back, and suddenly you're back where you started. That's not discipline, that's intensity. And intensity is unreliable. Real discipline is different. It's quiet, it's steady. It doesn't need to feel good because it's not based on emotion. It's based on decision. Now here's the truth most people avoid. Discipline is doing what must be done, especially when you don't feel like it. Not sometimes. Not when it's convenient. Every time it matters. And this is where most people struggle, because they're waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel motivated, waiting for the right moment. But that moment rarely comes, and if it does, it doesn't last. So they stay stuck, waiting, delaying, repeating. Now here's the shift. You stop negotiating with yourself. You remove the option. You decide, this is what I do, regardless of how I feel. And that decision creates stability. Because now your actions are no longer controlled by emotion. They're controlled by commitment. Now imagine this. You wake up, and instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" you ask, "Is this what I said I would do?" That one question changes everything because it removes emotion from the equation. And once emotion is removed, consistency becomes possible. Now let's go deeper. Discipline is not about doing everything perfectly. It's about doing the right things repeatedly. Small actions, daily, without interruption. Because those small actions compound. They build momentum. They create results, not instantly, but inevitably. Now think about this. If you committed to one action, just one, and did it every day for a year, what would happen? You wouldn't be the same person. Your results would change. Your identity would shift. Your life would move forward. But most people never experience that because they break consistency. They skip days. They delay. They restart. And every time they do, they reset the process. Now here's the truth. Consistency is more powerful than intensity, always. Because intensity burns out. Consistency builds. Now pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what is one thing you can commit to every single day? Not something extreme, something sustainable, something real. Because that's where discipline begins, not in big actions, in repeated ones. Chapter 18, The Long Game. Now we step into something that most people struggle with, patience. Because in a world of speed, everything feels urgent. Immediate results, quick wins, fast success. And when things don't happen quickly, people get frustrated. They doubt themselves. They stop. And this is where many journeys end, right before they begin to work, because wealth, growth, progress are long games, not short ones. Now here's the truth. What takes time lasts. What happens quickly often disappears. And most people are chasing speed. They want results now. They want proof immediately. They want validation quickly. But real progress, it builds slowly, quietly, without attention, until one day it becomes visible. Now think about this. A tree doesn't grow overnight. It takes time. Roots first, then structure, then growth. And for a long time, nothing seems to happen. But underground, everything is building, and then suddenly, it rises. That's how real growth works. And your life is no different. Now here's where most people fail. They quit in the invisible phase, when results aren't obvious, when progress feels slow, when effort doesn't seem to pay off. They assume it's not working, but it is. They just can't see it yet. Now here's the shift. You stop chasing immediate results. You start trusting the process. You focus on consistency. You focus on direction. You focus on building even when it feels slow. Because slow progress is still progress, and slow progress compounds. Now imagine this. Instead of expecting results in weeks, you commit to years, not passively, but intentionally. What happens? Pressure decreases. Clarity increases. Consistency becomes easier because you're no longer rushing. You're building, and building creates something that lasts. Now pause, ask yourself, are you playing the short game or the long game? Because that choice determines everything. And now we move into the final stretch. Because you've seen the traps, you've understood the shifts, you've explored the mindset. But now we bring it all together into one clear path, one clear direction, one clear way forward. And this is where everything becomes real. Chapter 19, Integration, Turning Awareness into Action. Now everything comes together, not as ideas, not as motivation, but as a system. Because knowing the traps is only the beginning. Avoiding them requires structure, and structure is what turns awareness into results. Now let's bring this down to something real, simple, clear, actionable. Because if you leave this audiobook with nothing but inspiration, nothing will change. But if you leave with a system, everything can. First, control your input, what you see, what you hear, what you consume daily, because your environment shapes your thinking, and your thinking shapes your decisions. If you constantly expose yourself to comparison, you will feel behind. If you constantly expose yourself to distraction, you will lose focus. So you choose intentionally. You limit noise. You protect your attention, because attention is the foundation of everything. Second, create your gap. Every time money comes in, you decide what stays. Not emotionally, not impulsively, intentionally. You build space, and that space becomes your power, because it gives you options. Freedom to think, freedom to act, freedom to grow. Third, focus on one direction, not 5, not 10, 1, and you commit. Through discomfort, through boredom, through uncertainty, because direction without consistency means nothing. But direction with consistency creates momentum, and momentum changes everything. Fourth, separate emotion from action. You feel something. You pause. You don't react immediately. You think. You choose. Because your emotions are real, but they are not always right. And if you let them control your decisions, your life becomes unpredictable. Fifth, think long-term, not occasionally, daily. You ask, how does this decision affect me later, not just now? Because short-term thinking creates short-term results, and long-term thinking builds long-term stability. Now, here's the key. You don't need to do all of this perfectly, you just need to start. Because perfection is another trap. Progress is what matters. Now imagine this. You apply just 50% of what you've learned. Not everything, just half. What happens? Your spending improves. Your focus sharpens. Your direction becomes clearer. And over time, those small improvements compound into something powerful. Now pause, take a moment, not to think about everything, but to choose one thing, one shift, one change, something you can apply today. Because action is what turns knowledge into results. Chapter 20, the responsibility shift. There is one final shift that most people avoid because it's uncomfortable, it's direct, and it removes every excuse. Responsibility, full responsibility for your life, your decisions, your habits, your outcomes. Now here's the truth. As long as you blame something outside of you, you give away control. The economy, your job, your past, other people, all of it. It might be valid, it might be real, but it doesn't change one thing. It doesn't move you forward. Now understand this clearly. Responsibility is not blame. It's power. Because when you take responsibility, you take control. You stop waiting. You stop hoping. You start acting. Now think about this. If everything in your life is your responsibility, what changes? Your mindset shifts from victim to builder, from reacting to creating. And that shift is everything. Because once you accept that, you realize something powerful. You don't need permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need everything to be ideal. You just need to move. Now here's the deeper layer. Responsibility is not a one-time decision. It's a daily one. Every day you choose, do I take control or do I give it away? In small moments, invisible moments, moments that seem insignificant, but define everything. Now pause. Ask yourself honestly, where have you been giving away responsibility? And what would happen if you took it back? Because that decision is where your life begins to change. And now, we move into the final chapter, not an ending, but a commitment, because everything you've heard, everything you've understood, leads to one question. What will you do next? Let's finish this the right way. Chapter 21, The Commitment That Changes Everything. There is a moment, quiet, personal, almost invisible, where everything you've heard either fades away or becomes real. This is that moment, because knowledge alone does nothing. You can understand every trap. You can recognize every pattern. You can feel motivated, clear, even inspired. But if nothing changes in your actions, your life stays the same. And that's the part most people miss. They listen, they agree, they reflect, and then they return to the same habits, the same decisions, the same patterns that quietly keep them stuck. So now the question is not, did this make sense? The question is, what will I do differently? Because your future is not shaped by what you know. It's shaped by what you repeat, daily, consistently, without interruption. Now, let's make this real, not theoretical, not abstract, real. You wake up tomorrow. What changes? Not everything. Just one thing, one decision, one action. Maybe you pause before spending. Maybe you protect 1 hour of focus. Maybe you stop comparing. Maybe you commit to consistency. One shift, that's it. Because one shift, repeated daily, becomes transformation. Now, imagine this. You don't try to fix your entire life. You don't overwhelm yourself. You don't chase perfection. You choose one pattern and you break it completely, consistently, without negotiation. What happens? Clarity increases, control strengthens, confidence builds. And once that happens, you're no longer the same person, because identity is shaped by action, not intention. Now, here's something most people don't realize. Change doesn't come from big moments. It comes from small, repeated decisions that feel almost insignificant at the time. But over weeks, over months, over years, they become everything. Now pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, what is the one pattern that is holding me back the most? Not all 10. One, because that's where you start. Chapter 22, Becoming Someone Different. There is something deeper than money, deeper than habits, deeper than strategy, identity. Because everything you do, every decision you make, every action you take, comes from who you believe you are. And if that doesn't change, nothing else will last. Now think about this. A person who sees themselves as disciplined acts differently. A person who sees themselves as focused moves differently. A person who sees themselves as someone who builds wealth decides differently. Not because they force it, but because it's who they are. Now here's the truth. You don't build a new life by trying to act differently once. You build it by becoming someone different over time. And that happens through repetition, through consistency, through showing up even when it's not easy. Because every action is a vote for who you are becoming. Now imagine this. Every time you choose discipline, you reinforce that identity. Every time you stay focused, you strengthen it. Every time you act intentionally, you build it. And over time, it becomes automatic. You no longer think about it. You just are. Now pause. Ask yourself, who am I becoming through my daily actions? Because that answer is your future. Chapter 23, The Silent Advantage. There is a kind of progress that no one sees, no applause, no attention, no validation. Just quiet effort, consistency, focus. And this is where the real advantage is built. Because while most people are distracted, you're building. While most people are comparing, you're focusing. While most people are reacting, you're controlling. And that difference doesn't show immediately, but over time, it becomes undeniable. Now here's the key. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to announce your progress. You don't need to show every step. Because real growth doesn't need attention. It needs consistency. And when the results come, they speak for themselves. Now imagine this. 6 months from now, 1 year from now, you look back and you realize you're not the same person. Not because of one big moment, but because of daily decisions. That's the silent advantage, and it belongs to those who stay consistent when no one is watching. To chapter 24, The Life You Build. Now, everything becomes simple, not easy, but simple. Your life is built on patterns, daily patterns repeated over time, and those patterns create your reality. Not your intentions, not your plans, not your ideas, your actions. Now think about this. If someone watched your daily life without hearing your goals, what would they say you're building? Because your actions tell the truth, always. Now here's the shift. You align your actions with the life you want, not occasionally, consistently, because alignment creates progress, and progress creates results. Now imagine this. Every day you move slightly forward, not perfectly, not dramatically, just consistently. What happens? Momentum builds, confidence grows, direction becomes clear, and over time, your life changes, not by chance, by design. Chapter 25, The Final Line. This is where we close, not with an ending, but with a decision. Because everything you've heard, everything you've understood, comes down to one thing: action, not tomorrow. Not someday, now. Because delay is one of the most expensive habits you can keep. And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to start. So here's your moment. Right now, you choose to continue as you are, or to move differently, to repeat old patterns, or to build new ones, to stay aware, or to act on that awareness. Because awareness without action is wasted, but awareness with action is transformation. If something in this audiobook resonated with you, don't ignore it. Write it down. Say it out loud. Commit to it. Because clarity fades if it's not reinforced. And if you want to go further, if you want to build a life of focus, discipline, and control, stay consistent. Stay intentional. Stay aware. And if this message reached you, share it with someone who needs it. Not for attention, but because awareness can change lives. Remember this. You don't build wealth by chasing more. You build it by becoming someone who wastes less, focuses more, and acts with intention. And now, you have everything you need to begin chapter 26. The hidden war you fight every day. There is a battle happening in your life every single day, and most people don't even realize they're in it. It's not outside. It's not in the economy, not in your job, not in other people. It's inside, between two versions of you, the one that wants comfort and the one that wants growth, the one that says, take it easy, you deserve a break, and the one that whispers, you said you wanted more. This is the real battlefield, because every decision you make is a vote for comfort or a vote for growth. And here's the truth. You cannot build a different life while choosing the same comfort. That's the contradiction most people live in. They want change, but they protect the habits that prevent it. They want more, but they stay inside what's familiar. They want growth, but avoid discomfort. And that's why nothing changes, not because they don't want it, but because they're not willing to face what it requires. Now pause. Think about your last 24 hours. Not what you planned. What you actually did. Where did you choose comfort? Where did you avoid effort? Where did you delay something important? No judgment, just awareness. Because awareness is where power begins. Chapter 27. The Cost of Delay. There is one habit that silently destroys more futures than failure ever could. Delay. I'll start tomorrow. I'll fix it later. I just need more time. It sounds harmless. It feels reasonable. But it is one of the most expensive decisions you can make. Because delay is not neutral. It moves you backward. Every day you delay, you lose momentum. You lose clarity. You lose energy, and over time, you lose belief. Now here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You don't need more time. You need to start. Because clarity doesn't come before action. It comes from action. Confidence doesn't come before movement. It comes from movement. And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes. Because delay builds resistance. It turns small actions into big obstacles. Now imagine this. You take one small step today. Not perfect, not complete. Just one step. What happens? Momentum begins. And momentum makes everything easier. Now imagine the opposite. You wait, you think, you delay. What happens? Resistance grows. And resistance makes everything harder. Now pause. Ask yourself, what have I been delaying that I know I need to start? Because that answer is your next move. Chapter 28. Rewriting your daily script. Your life is not built in big moments. It's built in daily scripts, the things you do automatically, without thinking, without questioning. Wake up, check your phone, scroll, react, repeat, day after day. And over time, that script becomes your life. Now here's the truth. If you don't rewrite your daily script, nothing changes. Because your results are a reflection of your routine. Now think about this. What does your day look like right now? From the moment you wake up to the moment you sleep. Where is your focus? Where is your energy going? What are you building? Because that script is shaping your future. Now here's the shift. You don't change everything. You change one part, one habit, one moment, and you do it consistently. Maybe it's your first hour. Maybe it's your focus time. Maybe it's how you spend your evenings. One change, repeated daily. And over time, that small change rewrites your entire life. Because routines compound, just like money. Chapter 29. The discipline of saying no. There is a skill that most people underestimate, and it has nothing to do with effort. It has everything to do with boundaries. Saying no. No to distractions. No to unnecessary spending. No to things that don't align with your direction. Because every yes comes with a cost: time, energy, focus. And if you say yes to everything, you lose control of all three. Now here's the truth. You don't build a better life by doing more. You build it by doing less, intentionally. And that requires saying no, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels difficult, even when others don't understand. Because your life is your responsibility, not theirs. Now imagine this. Every time something doesn't align, you say no. What happens? Your time clears, your focus sharpens, your energy increases, and suddenly you have space. Space to build, space to grow, space to think. And that space is where progress happens. Chapter 30, the final realization. Now we reach something deeper, a realization that changes everything. You don't need more information. You don't need more motivation. You don't need more time. You need alignment between what you know and what you do. Because most people already know what to do. Save more, focus more, be consistent, avoid distractions. They know, but they don't act. And that gap between knowing and doing is where most lives stay stuck. Now here's the shift. You close the gap. Not with intensity, not with pressure, with consistency. Small actions, repeated daily, aligned with your direction. Because alignment creates power, and power creates results. Now pause, take a breath, and let this settle. Because this is not just an audiobook. This is a mirror, a reflection of your patterns, your habits, your decisions, and now you see them clearly. So here's the final question. Not for tomorrow, not for someday, right now. What are you going to do differently starting today? Because that answer is the beginning of everything. You are not broke because you don't work hard enough. Let that sit for a second. You are not behind because you lack intelligence. You are not stuck because the world is against you. And you are definitely not poor because you didn't try hard enough. The truth is quieter than that, more uncomfortable than that, more dangerous than that. You are stuck because you are repeating patterns you cannot see. Patterns that feel normal. Patterns that feel harmless. Patterns that slowly drain your future while convincing you everything is fine. And that's the problem, because what feels normal is often what keeps you stuck. Welcome to this audiobook, 10 Wealth Traps That Quietly Keep You Poor. This is not a book about hustle. This is not a book about motivation. This is a book about awareness. Because before you can build wealth, you must stop leaking it. Before you can grow, you must see clearly. And in this audiobook, you're going to uncover 10 silent traps. Not obvious mistakes, not dramatic failures, quiet patterns. The kind that blend into your daily life, the kind that look like just how things are. But over time, they shape everything. Your money, your habits, your identity, your future. And here's the line you need to remember from the very beginning. Wealth is not blocked by what you don't know. It's blocked by what you don't question. So today, we question everything. And we start with the trap that almost everyone falls into without even realizing it. Chapter 1. When more money changes nothing. There is a moment in life that feels like progress. A raise, a better job, a successful month. More money comes in. And for a brief moment, you feel ahead. Like things are about to change. Like you've finally moved forward. But then life quietly adjusts. Your spending increases, your standards rise, your comfort expands, and before you realize it, you're right back where you started. Same pressure, same stress, same feeling of not enough. This is the first trap. And it's one of the most dangerous because it feels like success, turning every increase in income into an increase in lifestyle. It feels earned, it feels deserved, and in many ways, it is. But here's what you don't see. Every time your income grows, and your expenses grow with it, you cancel your own progress. You move, but you don't advance. You earn more, but you don't keep more. And that gap between what you earn and what you keep, that's where wealth begins. Not in your salary, not in your job title, not in how much money passes through your hands, but in what stays. And what stays is determined by your behavior. Now pause. Think about your last increase in income. What changed? Did your savings grow? Or did your lifestyle expand? Because that answer is your pattern. And patterns create outcomes. Now here's the deeper problem. It's not just about money. It's about conditioning. Because every time you reward yourself with spending, you teach your brain something. You teach it that progress equals consumption, that success equals upgrading your life immediately. And that belief is expensive because it keeps you focused on the present while quietly stealing your future. Now imagine a different approach. You earn more, but your lifestyle stays the same, just for a while. You create space. You build a gap. You allow money to accumulate instead of disappear. What happens? Pressure decreases. Options increase. Control returns. Because for the first time, you're not chasing money. You're holding it. And that changes everything. But most people never experience that because they close the gap too quickly. They earn and spend instantly, like filling a bucket with a hole at the bottom and wondering why it never stays full. This is the first trap. And unless you break it, no amount of income will ever feel like enough. Now here's where it gets even more subtle. Because once people fall into this pattern, they start making another mistake. One that feels smart, but costs them far more than they realize. A trap that disguises itself as saving money while actually draining it. And most people fall into it every single day. Let's go deeper. The lie of cheap. There is a belief that sounds responsible. It sounds disciplined. It sounds intelligent. Save money. Buy the cheapest option. And on the surface, that seems like the right move. But here's the truth. Most people never stop to question. Cheap is not the same as smart. And confusing the two is one of the most expensive habits you can build. Now think about this. Someone buys the cheapest shoes they can find. They look fine at first. They feel acceptable. But months later, they wear out. So they buy another pair, and another, and another. And over time, they've spent more than they would have on something that actually lasted. But the real cost wasn't just money. It was discomfort. It was frustration. It was the constant distraction of dealing with something that never worked properly, and that pattern doesn't stop with small purchases. It spreads into your environment, your tools, your decisions, even your time, because cheap choices often come with hidden costs. Time wasted fixing problems, energy drained dealing with inefficiency, opportunities missed because something wasn't reliable. And those costs don't show up immediately. They show up later, when it's harder to notice. Now here's why this trap is so dangerous. Because it feels logical. You tell yourself, I'm saving money. But in reality, you're trading long-term value for short-term comfort, and that trade adds up quietly, relentlessly. Now let's go deeper. This is not just about what you buy, it's about how you think. Because when you constantly choose cheap, you train your standards downward. You get used to less. You accept inconvenience. You tolerate discomfort. You stop expecting things to work well, and over time, that mindset spreads into your work, your decisions, your expectations of life itself. Because standards are not isolated. They shape everything. Now here's the shift. You stop asking, what costs the least? And you start asking, what gives me the most value over time? That question changes everything. Because now, you're thinking long-term. You're thinking strategically. You're thinking like someone building something, not just surviving. Now imagine this. Every decision you make is based on value, not price. You invest in things that last. You choose tools that improve your life. You build an environment that supports your growth. What happens? Friction decreases, clarity increases. Progress accelerates because your environment starts working for you instead of against you. Now pause. Look around your life, your space, your tools, your daily systems. Are they helping you move forward, or are they quietly slowing you down? Because everything you interact with either supports your growth or drains it. There is no neutral. Now here's where it gets even more dangerous. Because after people fall into the trap of cheap thinking, they often step into something even deeper. Something that has nothing to do with logic and everything to do with emotion. A trap built on comparison. A trap built on ego. A trap that makes people spend money not to improve their life, but to prove something to others. And this one has destroyed more financial futures than almost anything else. Let's step into it. The cost of looking like you're winning. There is a moment, quiet, almost invisible, where your decisions stop being about your life and start being about how your life looks. It happens fast. You see someone online, you notice what they have, the car, the lifestyle, the travel, the image, and without realizing it, a thought appears. I should be there too. Not because you need it, not because it improves your life, but because it signals something. Status, success, arrival. This is the comparison trap. And it's one of the most expensive games you can play. Because once you step into it, you're no longer building your life. You're performing it. Now your decisions change. You don't buy because something adds value. You buy because it adds perception. You don't spend because you need it. You spend because it looks right. And here's the dangerous part. It works. For a moment. People notice, people react, you feel ahead. But that feeling never lasts. Because comparison has no finish line. There is always someone with more, always someone ahead, always someone living a version of life that looks better from the outside. So what do? You chase again, upgrade again, spend again, and slowly you enter a cycle that never ends. Now think about this honestly. How many of your financial decisions were actually yours? And how many were influenced by what you saw, what you felt, what you thought others expected? Because that difference is everything. Now here's the truth most people don't want to face. Trying to look rich is one of the fastest ways to stay poor. Because real wealth is quiet. It doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't perform. But the illusion of wealth, that's loud. It demands attention. It requires constant maintenance. And it comes with a price, a continuous price. And over time, that price becomes pressure. Now, you're not just spending, you're sustaining an image, an expectation, a version of life that isn't built on stability. And that creates something dangerous, dependency. Because now your income is not just supporting your life, it's supporting your image. And the moment that income shifts, everything feels unstable. Now here's the deeper layer. Comparison doesn't just affect your money. It affects your identity. You start measuring yourself differently. You start feeling behind even when you're progressing. You start questioning your path even when it's working. Because you're no longer comparing reality. You're comparing perception. And perception is often misleading. Now here's the shift. You step out of the game completely, not by resisting it, but by redefining success. Not what looks good, what actually works. Not what impresses others, what builds your future. Now imagine this. You stop measuring your life against others. You focus only on your direction, your progress, your growth. What happens? Pressure disappears. Clarity returns. Decisions become easier. Because now you're not reacting, you're building. Now pause. Ask yourself, am I building my life or performing it? Because that answer is shaping your future right now. And now we go deeper into something even more subtle. Because even when people stop comparing, even when they try to focus, they fall into another trap. A trap that feels productive. A trap that looks like progress. A trap that keeps them busy, but not moving forward. And this one wastes more time than failure ever could. Let's go there. The illusion of being busy. There is a trap that feels like progress. It looks like effort. It feels productive. It even gives you a sense of control. But in reality, it keeps you exactly where you are. This is the illusion of being busy. And it's one of the most dangerous wealth traps. Because it convinces you that you're moving forward when you're not. Now think about your day. You answer messages. You scroll through information. You watch content about success. You organize your plans. You think about what you should do next. And by the end of the day, you feel tired. You feel like you've done something